Hi, it's Kate, and I'm going to show you how to make a book similar to this. Now, this book is a book that I keep my postage, my used postage in for using in a collage. But what I'm going to show you how to do is it's going to look a lot better than this. This was my first one that I had ever made, and there were a lot of mistakes made. And after a while, I got to a point where I had put enough effort into it that I no longer cared to make it look nice. I just wanted to make it usable. What's interesting about this book is that underneath the decorative paper on the cover is I have used cut up bits of a bubble mailer. So the book I'm going to teach you is very simple. You're going to need to take a bubble mailer and cut two rectangles that are the same size. And those rectangles are going to get covered with paper and become your front and back covers of your book. You're also going to take a piece of cardboard and cut it to be the length of the longest edge or the vertical of your book. Now, this is a 1.5 inch piece of cardboard. I have cut it and I have already adhered it to a piece of fabric. Could have been a little premature. We'll see. I've also taken, I'm going to make a 7 signature book. So I've taken and in the center I've poked 7 holes, about 1 inch from the top, 7 holes, and about 1 inch from the bottom. It doesn't matter to me how well the holes are separated, because this is just going to be something I'm using for myself. Now, what my pages are going to be made out of. I have a neighbor that will often put a box of free stuff that she puts out on her curb. And she put a bunch of these old report covers. And the covers have kind of turned yellow. And I took them anyway, thinking that I could find something to do with them. So what I ended up doing was I cut them apart. I cut just along this edge here, so I could simply remove this paper part. Then what I had done was I took the paper part, I measured my book cover, and I cut it down. I cut that paper down to be a size that was roughly, it's going to roughly be 1/4 inch on each side, the top and the bottom, and one of the sides on the book cover. So I have a little bit of room on each side. And I cut it down, folded it in half with my bone folder, and then what I'm going to do is now I'm going to adhere some strips of deli paper. My brain just died. Now I take deli paper and I cut it the long way. So I want it to, it needs to be longer across than my book is. My book pages will be, because I need it to stick out on the side. And I will show you why as I put it together. Now, putting this together is pretty simple. What I like to do is I like to take and have the bottoms of my pages be about a 1.5 inch strip of this deli paper. And I like to have it on the bottom because sometimes there's bigger pieces of ephemera that I want to put in there. So what I do is I start putting my ephemera folder together on the bottom of this. So what I'll do is I take and I just put a bead of, I'm using glitter glue, art glitter glue, and I am just dragging a long narrow bead of glue along the bottom edge for me to put this down. Now I also make sure that on my deli paper that the smooth side is on the top and the rough side is going to be against my folder. And as soon as I do that, I make sure it's on straight and I run my finger down the length of it and make sure it sticks. Now, I take the other 1.5 inch strip of deli paper and I put it on the exact same way. Now this piece of paper I'm going to have is going to be a signature. I don't want to add any more signatures, pieces of paper into this signature. But what I do want is I want to have ease of access. I don't want to have my bits falling in between, even though I really don't care. Some of them get bent up because it just kind of adds texture to what they're going to be used for. I tend not to stress out too much about stuff, but I do put a little bead of glue right down the middle there so that that holds it there so they don't slide between signatures, because this is going to be the fold and I really don't want the paper in this pocket to work their way around in the center and get bent up. Now this is where the big importance for having your pieces of paper ending up being longer than your paper you're using for your signature. So what I do now is I take and I draw a bead of glue down the length of one of my pieces of deli paper. This is a 1 inch piece of deli paper. And this is my trick. I don't know if this is gonna work. We're gonna make sure I'm in view here. Is I like to put it so it lines up on my grid. I have the glue on the bottom. I make sure that this one has the glue on the bottom. And then I make sure that this edge is lined up so it's straight. And then I just take this and I lay it down. Then I flip it over. I add a bit of glue to the inside. And I'm sure this is something that does not need to be done. But again, I like it. Now I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to take another piece of deli paper and run a thin bead of glue down this bottom edge. It doesn't have to be exact. Again, I'm just doing this for me. And basically what I want is I want it to be on there well enough because I am going to sew now. So after this, now what I do is I line up this piece of paper and I have it at a little bit after that. Make sure this one is lined up on my grid here. Oh goodness. Okay, we'll try again. The grid. My grid is, it's on my grid. I'm gonna put this over here so it's a little further out. Nothing like making things as complicated as possible. And again, I'm lining this up so the bottom of this is on the same thing up here. I want to make sure that both ends of that piece of paper are sticking out, and they are. And then I'm going to rub that down. Now I'm only going to do this for each of the pieces of paper that I'm using to hold inside my book. So this is one of those 7 signatures I'm sewing in. Even though it's not technically a signature because it is just one piece, due to the thickness of the paper, I really feel like that is enough. I don't want to lay them inside of each other because I don't want them to get loose and start working their way out of my binder. So now the next 2 pieces are really easy to put in. Again, always make sure you glue on the rough side of your deli paper. I don't know if something would come up where gluing on the shinier side is going to cause problems. I just know that I haven't had problems with it glued on this side. So again, I'm going to take this. It does not have to be a perfect line of glue because I am going to go over this again. I just need it to get in there and stay stuck. I do like if it spreads a little bit, simply because it makes kind of for a more secure pocket. Now this is where having your pieces of paper longer, your little deli strips, longer than the page you're working on comes in handy, because all you have to do is match. And you just lay it down. Now I will often go ahead and add my next strip in before I add this little middle thing in, but I'm gonna do it while I'm thinking. Get my big head in the way here. And there we go for that. I'm not doing the sides. You'll see why in just a second because I'm gonna sew all of these pages together. But for the 3rd row, I'm just gonna glue. Now I like to give it a little time to set, and I'm very likely going to do that before I go on to the next step, because the next step I'm about to show you is sewing. And I'm going to just go over it quick. And again, this doesn't really matter that I'm getting glue all over God in Creation here, because I can take it and just put a piece of paper in there and kind of fudge it around until I make some space. So this was the hard part. This is absolutely the hardest part for getting this folder together. And again, gluing it up the center. And now I can put my lid on my art glitter glue. And I'm about halfway through with my glitter glue. I store it flat like this, because then I don't have to wait for all of the glue to come rolling up the top. So just a second and I'll start showing you what I do when I sew. Okay, now I've moved my camera so that you can see how I'm doing this. But first I want to show you that I am snipping the overhang of these papers off. I don't need to do it right now, and I don't need to do a perfect job, because again, I am just going to be using this to store the ephemera that I keep for my projects. So again, I like that I can see through this, and I can simply snip those off. Now, the first thing that I always sew is I sew the bottom edge. I don't think it matters which one you sew first, but because those pieces were overhanging, I can actually see where I am going to sew, and I know with confidence that what I sew looking at on this side is going to look the same on the other side. Now I'm using a Brother CS5055 Project Runway model machine, and I have this on stitch number 4, which it looks to me to be a basic zigzag stitch. I am not a seamstress. I've really, you know, if you've got questions on sewing, I am not the person to ask, because I find this to be lucky every time I sew that I get the same stitch. So all I'm doing is sewing along the bottom. Okay. I don't bother with doing a back stitch because I'm going to put a little dot of glue on this when I'm putting the pages together. And then I'm going to do this side. Go down this row, making sure that I have everything the same. I don't trust that I have enough of a piece of thread sticking out the back. So I've had my thread pull out of my needle enough that I just pinch it every time. Well, that was lucky. My thread ran out just at the very end. So I'm going to put a little bit more thread on my bobbin, and then I'll be back to do that last row of sewing. Okay, welcome back a day later since I completely messed up on my little project yesterday. I didn't manage to finish showing you how I was sewing my pages. So this is my book. It's completed already, but I can easily walk you through how to do this. I finished my third row of stitching, and again, because I let the pieces overhang, I'm able to match them up exactly, so they're nice and securely held in my book. Then the next thing that I did was I stitched up each side to hold down the edges of my strips. The one thing I would encourage you to watch out for is make sure you start from the bottom and sew up so that you're not sewing against the loose edges of your strips of paper. After that, I put a dot of glue at each junction of the where the threads cross and where the threads end. Each one got a little dot of glue on both sides of each little signature folder part. Then after I matched up my holes to what I had previously done in my on my piece of chipboard, I sewed them in. I did a simple pamphlet stitch. I tried to start it in the very middle of my row of papers for this one. So if this were the middle piece, this is the first one I would have go in, and I go in through the center, and then on the outside edge I come up and I go into the top hole, and then I come in through this hole and down here, and then this one goes down out through this hole and then back up to the top. And then after that, then I tied it off, and I individually sewed each of these signatures into my book. And that probably took the longest, but as long as you're paying attention to where you're sewing, it's a pretty easy thing to do. Then after that, I took my next piece of paper, and I folded it so that it would glue down on my chipboard right next to my page. And then when I close my book, it is somewhat flush. And I did the same thing back here. Now if I wanted to, I could put I could glue or add a pocket to this paper, but for now I'm really happy with the way it is. Then what I did was I threaded my piece of seam binding through my strings, and what I did is I just pushed it through using my little pokey tool here. I put a little bit of decoration on the front of my book. The handmade and this little frame were all parts of that Dear Lizzie paper pad, and this is a doily from Roxy Creations. And the reason I did that was so that I know at a glance that this is the front of my book, so when I pick it up, I'm not carrying everything where it can slide out. And then I just tied my string around it, and very simple to do. I was initially going to do something to the spine before I sewed it because I wasn't loving the way the Fabri-Tac seeped through my muslin, but I'm okay with it. Again, it's a project just for me, but I hope that you're able to find a way to make this work. I did want to show you here, this is that one where I kind of dropped my paper all over the cardboard while I was trying to line it up, and it was simple to just, what I ended up doing was just sticking a piece of paper in here and kind of tapping it back and forth until it loosened up. Really simple to do. Absolutely no extra cost out of pocket. This is stuff I had laying around. I had that really old piece of chipboard from a cereal box, free bubble mailers, and the deli paper I have laying around because I jelly print on it. And this was what was left from the Dear Lizzie pad of paper that I hadn't used up yet. So again, this is just a very simple project to do. I hope that if you try to decide to do something like this, you'll let me know and show it. Tag me on Facebook and let me see what you've done. I'm also on Instagram, same name, and let me know what you're doing. Have a great day. Bye.